It's going to be a very, very intense journey.
Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 100 of the Frame Skip podcast. I am your host, Austin Eller. I've been gone for like a month, but I'm back. You know who else is back? Seth, Mr. Star Wars canon himself, Slake House. How's it going? You are canon.
I am canon. I'm the encyclopedia of what is canon in Star Wars. And as we found earlier, the only thing that matters that's canon in Star Wars is Rey being a Skywalker.
Yes.
So
Obi-Wan show, not canon, unfortunately.
Not, no.
Sorry
the
to let
Clone
everybody
Wars,
know.
not canon. Rebels, not canon. Ahsoka Tano, not canon.
The only canon
Empire Strikes Back, not canon.
The only canon thing from the Clone Wars is that original movie that started it all off.
Yes.
That's it. Nothing else.
Yeah. Actually, you know what else is canon? Rey stabbing Kylo Ren with the lightsaber and him being alive 5 minutes later. That's canon.
Isn't that interesting? That somebody can be stabbed by a lightsaber and survive?
It's weird, actually. I don't know.
Wow.
Amazing, actually.
Coaches are amused.
We're also joined by Mr. Nothing is Canon himself, the coach, Kyle Newman.
My name is Rey Palpatine, not Rey Skywalker. I'm a Palpatine.
That's good to know.
Canon.
That's good to
That
know.
is canon.
Well, and let me take a guess. In Coach's canon, Palpatine, his lightning that shoots out of his hands, it comes from little like bugs that are in his fingers.
Midichlorians.
And that's
there you
no,
go.
not midichlorians, bugs.
Oh,
Like,
you mean like
there's like worms in his hands, and that's what causes the lightning. I'm going to take a guess and say that's in your canon.
Sure, we can make it canon.
I'm thinking this conversation really bugs Seth.
No.
You know who's not bugging me? Elijah, the ladies' man, Steele.
I can
What's
change
up,
that. I'm doing all right. How about you?
I'm doing well now that I know the ins and outs of Star Wars canon, what is and what is not.
Which
What is and what
apparently
is
is
not.
pretty much everything.
Came in just in time for episode 100 of this show. What a special way to start off a triple-digit episode with random untrue facts about Star Wars lore. So it's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to celebrate episode 100 with you all. We've been going for a while. It's crazy. We actually started, I was thinking back on this earlier. We started in, I want to say it was February of 2020. Literally right as the pandemic started. So it's fascinating. It's interesting to go back and listen to those first few episodes because we talk about it unfolding and just the way that the world changed over the past, I guess, 2.5 years. It's been a wild ride, both on the podcast and in reality. So it's awesome that we were able to make it to this point. But
Yeah, dude. It's crazy because I thought we started in the summer for some reason, but I guess I was wrong about that.
I remember episode
wasn't
0 we recorded in February.
Yep.
March was the first episode.
Yeah. And I very clearly remember too, we talked about Animal Crossing on like episode 1 or 2. And that was like one of the key moments of like the early days of the pandemic was when Animal Crossing released and everybody was stuck at home and playing that game.
Yeah, because like episode 1, hey, everything's going great. Episode 2, oh wait.
So it's funny because of the pandemic, I bought 3 copies of Final Fantasy VII Remake because
I remember that.
I had originally ordered it at GameStop, or originally ordered it at Amazon, one or the other, but I couldn't get the collector's edition or like the deluxe edition at one of them, so I ordered it at the other and forgot to cancel it. And then because Final Fantasy VII Remake came out like the day of our lockdown, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to get it or not. So I also bought it on the PlayStation Network. but it turns out GameStop was doing this weird like curbside delivery service thing.
I
You
remember
could
that.
drive up and like
Mhm.
they would give it to your window. So that was pretty weird. But yeah, I ended up buying 3 copies of Final Fantasy VII Remake because of the pandemic. Weird time.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. I'm gonna have to go back soon and listen to those first few episodes, and I just remember we had an interesting kind of viewpoint on like how things were unfolding. So it's kind of a pocket of history as the early few episodes of the show. But
Before we get into the nuts and bolts of this episode, I do have a question for the two of you. Tell us about
the 3 of us.
for Austin and Seth. Tell us about how you guys actually started this journey together back before me and Elijah were Elijah got on first. You guys let him move up to varsity.
Yeah.
I was still water boy on JV, right?
Keep in mind, Coach, they never told me I moved up to varsity. They just kept saying, "Hey, do you want to come on as a guest for about 10 months straight?"
Yeah.
And
You guys realize
canon.
you've been podcasting with us longer than you haven't, though, right? Like,
Yes. Yes. But what I wanted
you
you
collectively maybe 50 episodes before you guys joined, and we've done probably 300 since.
Oh, we've done way more than that.
How did you start it? First of all, how did you guys meet? And then how did you guys create this podcast? Kind of give us the
It's actually funny because this brings up like an interesting point that I gave a speech at Austin's wedding, and I was trying so hard to remember the first time me and Austin like talked or met.
I know.
And I absolutely have no recollection of it. I know it was over Skype, but I do not know at all when it was and what was said or anything like that. I have no idea.
So it wasn't like a PSP message board or anything like that?
No.
From 2003?
It was a PSP Go message board specifically.
So message board for the PSP Go and the Game Boy Advance Micro only.
It's actually like a fascinating conversation because me and Austin both can't remember. Austin, do you remember? Were you friends with Chris?
Yes. So I remember my side. You'll have to tell your side. So I remember meeting Chris, who we started a podcast with, I guess, relatively soon after I started talking to him. That's how you and I started podcasting. I want to say, if I'm recalling correctly, I remember I started talking to him about the time Uncharted 3 came out, because I remember us playing that game a lot together, and that was probably the fall of 2011, if I'm recalling correctly. And I want to say we started our first podcast as a group together. Me, Seth, and several other people started it together. I want to say maybe in January or February of 2012. So it was within 4, 5, 6 months of me meeting Chris that we all came together for our first podcast. But I very clearly remember meeting Chris through YouTube, and we just started playing some games together. And Seth, I don't know how you got connected. Were you friends with Chris as well? And that's how it just kind of brought together?
I was friends with Jordan, who knew Chris.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So Jordan was another person who was on the first podcast we started.
Yeah,
so
that's how that went down. It's so weird, dude, because like YouTube, the YouTube gaming community was such a community back then.
Yeah.
That we all just kind of met up at the same time and started talking over Skype. And the weird thing was, too, is I specifically remember talking to like random other big YouTubers in Skype.
Yes.
Just being able to like pull them in. And I can't remember exactly how that worked. If there was like some sort of, maybe they used the same name on YouTube as Skype, but you were able to just like pull people into your calls. And I remember specifically because like, the guy that we used to do the podcast with, Chris, he used to get in fights with YouTubers all the time, dude. He would get in like these stupid, like petty fights over like console wars or something.
And that was all part of that community back in the day, by the way. It was not just him, it was everybody was fighting all the time.
It turned into like this brutal weeks, months long conflict with these other YouTubers, and they would make like 15 videos about each other and like just start dissing each other and like ripping each other apart. And then we'd get in Skype and we'd hear this constantly, and they'd pull me to the call and they'd start fighting. And like, I don't know, it doesn't sound fun now, but it was apparently pretty fun back then because we all kept doing it.
Yeah.
And we were all into it, but whatever. Yeah.
I just want you all to know, I pictured in my head a bar fight going on, but you two are just at the bar having a drink, and at one point you both just lift your drinks up as someone slides across the bar, and then you put your drinks back down and just keep drinking.
The funny thing is, Elijah, that's not far from the truth, because I very clearly remember like seeing Chris and other YouTubers and other people that were in our podcast fighting like with other YouTubers online, and I was just like, all right, here we go again. Like, I really don't care about fighting with this guy that has 400 subscribers on YouTube. Like, whatever, just let it go. And so it was interesting for sure.
So,
like, the community was that way.
So Elijah, my question to you is, how did you meet? How did you get into the community? And how did you get into the podcast?
So I actually met Seth through work. And it was just one day he started at where I worked. And he at one point mentioned, hey, I'm on a podcast, because we started talking about games and such. And I started listening. And I still remember the first time you had me on, it was an episode talking specifically about trophies and achievements. Because I remember that was back when I hung out at Susquehanna University all the time. And I shut myself in my friend's dorm and recorded on my laptop. Because I was over there for the night. I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this thing quick. And I just closed the door, locked her out of her room, and just recorded the episode. And ever since then, I've just been talking to everyone. We started playing games together. And then eventually it was like, hey, do you want to come on more often? And then more often turned into like every week. But again, they weren't making me a member of the podcast. They were just having me on every single week. It was about 10 months later, they're like, so we decided to have him join permanently. I'm like, when?
You gotta understand, though, the context behind that.
Yeah, there is a lot of context behind that.
Me and Austin were trying to make the responsible decision, because in the year and a half or something like that we had been podcasting before that, we went through like 10 different permanent members of the show.
And he's not lying.
Yeah, and like it was just like a revolving door of people just coming and going constantly.
I know this is true, considering you started at the beginning of 2012, and I started listening in later 2012, and only met half of them.
Yeah.
So I remember
very first podcast, I remember we had, this was crazy at the time too. Seth, do you remember when we started that first podcast? Like I said, it was probably January of 2012. I don't even think we lasted 15 episodes, if that. I just very clearly remember us having like 6 people on the call at one time in a single podcast. And that was awful.
That's anarchy.
I think it may have been more than that. I think it may have been like 8. Yeah. Because there was a lot. And I remember someone made the graphic for it. I can go back through my thing here.
I remember that, and I remember us, even in those first 15 episodes, we went through probably 3 additional people on top of those 6 or 7 or 8 or however many we started off with. And then even on the second podcast, which all of us were on, if I'm remembering correctly, is that right? Were all 3 were we all on Gaming Arena Central, or was it just Seth and I?
Just me and you.
Yeah.
No, I think Elijah was on there towards the end, because we had Eric. Eric was
when
on
you guys
there.
started coming into the fold. That's why I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And then who's the kid with the red hair that was from Seattle?
Oh, Scott.
That's how I met you guys, was through him, because he made a comment on one of my videos, so I started commenting on his, and we subbed each other. And so that's kind of how I met you guys, was through Scott.
Yeah. And so for context, by the way, if we've not made this clear enough, all these people were on YouTube. Like, we all made videos. Elijah's really the only one that started off exterior and came in and started making videos. But pretty much everybody we all found our way to each other through YouTube, which was really interesting. But I will say, shout out, because the one guy that I wish that we could still talk to more, and my favorite co-host from the history of our podcasting, Seth, is Eric Ladd. And that
Eric Ladd,
he is a nice young man.
He
does excellent music on YouTube. Go look him up.
It's funny because actually, Retro Game Remix. You bring this up, Austin. We're still waiting for him to come back. Because he told us when he went to Australia he was going to come back on the podcast when he was fully moved in. So, it's been about years. We're hoping he's coming back soon. We're waiting for.
Remember, we did that review with him. Remember what game we reviewed?
DuckTales.
Yes, DuckTales. That was fun.
So
I just wanted to wrap this up with a bow. I did find it. Our first episode of the Gaming Arena podcast was called Biz Love Dragonites. It was Chris, Darkstar Dude 8000, Justin, who's known. I don't know what he do. He keeps changing his name on YouTube. He has a bunch of subscribers now. But he was known as Justinity Misoa or something like that.
Oh my god. Stuff by Scout Fly, I know is his new name. I don't know if he still goes by that though.
Jordan Meeting Flipper and you, Austin, Mario Kart. Actually, it doesn't say Mario Kart Wii 140. It says Mario Kart 140. Did you add the Wii in later?
No, the Wii was only on my PSN ID. So
that makes it even funnier.
Yeah.
That makes it so much worse.
Xbox Wii 140.
And then we had Rob, Jeff Hardy, and RVD fan 7. And then me, Janet's Fights.
Some interesting folks.
With the most edgy tribal background on our thing of all time. It's ridiculous.
So, Coach, what do you remember? And then we'll head off from there. But how do you remember starting off?
Well, before I got onto any podcast, remember, we got on Google Hangouts. Remember that? Like, we spent a lot of Fridays, Saturdays on Google Hangouts with everybody. Like, Chris was on there, Keeb, right?
Keeb the joking gamer.
Yes. Rest in peace.
Yep.
And so,
you know what? There's enough time passed. I think it's appropriate we can talk about that happening because were you guys there? He literally we watched him die. Like,
I was not there, but I do remember something happened on a live stream. I remember there were.
Yeah, so if you know, there was this guy named Keeb the Joking Gamer. He had a YouTube channel, and he was friends with like a bunch of people, and he was kind of friends with us. And he was doing what was that? Was it Ustream or Justin TV? I can't remember.
One of them.
But he literally had like a heart attack or a stroke or something on camera, and the dude was like a prankster, like a YouTube like joking dude. He was always trying to like make people laugh and whatnot. So we thought he was like messing around for a while, and then like he just didn't get back up, and we were like, oh, he's just joking around or something. And then like we all ended the stream, and then we found out later that no, this dude died on camera, and. Yeah, then like I remember the Game Chasers made like a video tribute to him and stuff like that. It was a crazy story in time.
Yeah, well, and it was a big deal because Keeb, I remember Keeb. He didn't have too many views on YouTube, but I just remember everybody knew him. Like the entire gaming community knew Keeb, even though like he wasn't really a big channel.
Well, like our small gaming community knew him. I don't know, that's a whole story because people didn't treat him very well. I mean,
and he listened to them, and then he had backlash to our group. I remember.
Yeah, he got mad at us at one point. I remember that.
And isn't that the whole thing with gaming? Right? Was that?
Yeah, that was
towards you guys.
That was when Chris left the podcast. He's like, that's the gaming community.
Yeah. That's right. He was joined at the hip with Chris. I remember that. He kind of influenced, right?
We had some interesting people in our in our community, and I'm not just saying that as an individual. I'm saying that as a podcaster. We definitely had some interesting folks involved in previous podcasts.
Sure did.
And what I will tell you is that 100 episodes into this, and coming off of, I don't even know what we were at, 200 episodes of our prior podcast, I'm glad that all of us have kind of stuck together and have not had the issues that the first couple iterations of these shows have had. So it's exciting to reach this point.
It's like rock bands in their early days, right? Until they get their footing and
and some people just don't drive together. So I'm glad we kind of.
I actually still remember Coach and I came on at roughly the same time, but we weren't on an episode together for like 3 months because I needed to miss one for work and he would make it, and then I would make one but he would miss it. It went on like that for months until we were finally on an episode together.
Crazy.
Okay.
Well, I did want to jump right into a question before I forget about it. We have a question from Alden, who asks,
dying to hear.
I don't think I've ever asked this before, just never had the thought cross my mind, but is there a Monster Hunter game that I, as in me, Austin, hates? Alternatively, what's his least favorite of the series? No, there definitely is not one that I hate, but I do have some least favorites. I would say 1 and 2 are rough to go back to, so just they don't hold up well. So those are probably my least favorites, but honestly, they've gotten better over time. World and Rise are both the best iterations, in my opinion. Although I will say that 4 Ultimate I would put very high as well. So that's my list. Yeah. So I wanted to walk us through our big topic this week, and unless you guys want to go into games you've been playing, is there anything you want to talk about games wise? I don't know that I really have anything.
I think our big topic is big enough.
Okay, that's fine with me.
Yeah, I've played a lot, but nothing of note.
Okay. Coach brought up this idea. He wanted to discuss our favorite E3 moment, or the best E3 moment, I want to say is how you worded it, Coach, of all time, and we can only choose one. Only choose one, for me. Which is I know what it is. I know what it is for you. But it's an interesting topic though, because typically this week we would have E3, but the past 2-3 years, there's been no E3, and what E3 we've had has been lackluster, I would say.
Yeah, we had one last year, but it was very, very different.
Yeah. And so supposedly, by the way, they're bringing E3 back next year. They announced this week, supposedly.
Insert the Jennifer Lawrence gif here saying, yeah, okay.
Yeah, the I don't believe you meme.
I don't believe you.
And supposedly it's going to be in person, so we'll see how that goes next year. But for now, there's no E3 this year. We've got some conferences and stuff here and there, but I think we can all kind of agree that the magic has kind of died off a little bit from that. So it is interesting to kind of reminisce back on our favorite moments. I know there are plenty to talk through. There are so many ridiculous moments. There are so many hype moments and so many just like, what the hell are you doing moments? And so it's interesting to think back on, 20 years essentially of E3 and what that brought to the industry as a whole. So Elijah, what is your favorite E3 moment?
I want to start by saying I do still I will watch every conference and everything going on this year, even that Sonic Central that was 12 minutes.
What was that?
Let's not talk about it. But I'll still watch everything. But my biggest problem with how things are now is, man, I have to think, okay, what's going on today? For the next 2 weeks. My favorite thing about E3 was it was really these 3 condensed days of everything going on. Which brings me to my favorite moment of E3, which isn't of E3 itself. It was when we would all get together at my place and literally make a 3-day party out of it. And I'll never forget the year we were watching the Sony conference and they start showing this thing and you and I are like, no, this isn't Resident Evil. What is? And then it just comes up Resident Evil Biohazard, and we start freaking out. And then it comes up with the date, January 27th, and we freak out even harder.
Dude, that was
one of the best moments.
That was like during Sony's streak of like absolute banger E3 conferences, though.
It was, because there was another major thing that happened at that same conference, which was later when it pops up Insomniac, and then you just see something, and we all know it. We all turn to Seth, and you just see a look on his face of no way.
Yeah, dude. Yeah,
I was like, I had my moment with Resident Evil 7. It's all you, bro.
Absolutely melted my brain when I saw Spider-Man from Insomniac, because I loved the Infamous games so much, and then saw Spider-Man, and he was like doing all that dynamic, like flying through the buildings and whatnot, and it's still one of my favorite games of all time. So,
and I will say too, something interesting about that reveal. I very clearly remember around that time frame, that's when all the rumors were flying that Sucker Punch was going to be developing Spider-Man. Of course, like you said, the Infamous devs. And so when that popped up, I think we were all kind of like,
oh, what is it then?
Like, what the hell? And then we saw Spider-Man, and it totally flipped the leak, which I just remember being shocked on that front too.
What I was trying to say was because we knew there was a new Spider-Man game being developed because we hadn't seen one in a while, and of course Spider-Man games always get developed. But there was these rumors circulating about like a Sony exclusive Spider-Man game coming up to E3, but we hadn't heard much. And then all of a sudden, because I remember you see the Insomniac logo pop up, and you hear like the web thwip sound, and it's just like, what is happening, you know? And I love Insomniac. I actually think Insomniac's the best PlayStation studio right now. I think they eclipsed Naughty Dog a long time ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, for like 5 years straight, it started with me and Elijah just doing it with ourselves, but maybe it was even longer than 5 years. We always used to get together and watch all the E3 conferences. That was a great time. That was a great time, man.
That's the biggest reason I miss having them all in this E3 like 3-day schedule, is because even last year for E3, I took the days off work and I went to my friend Nick's, and for like 3 straight days we just watched stuff all day, and it was great. It was fun, and I'll miss that.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing I will say, as somebody who's just I feel like I'm busy all the time. I'm sure you guys are just as busy as I am, but I feel like I just can't keep up with all these different conferences anymore. So it was really nice when it was just a week, and it's like we know that everything is happening that week. And like you said, Elijah, it gives us time to get together as a group and hang out and just have a fun week together. And so I do miss that, and I don't think we'll ever get that again. But
I don't either.
It seems like now it's more for now. Once they let the public in, a lot of it is for content creators, right? So it's a lot different than what it was 10 years ago, 15 years.
That's how our news is consumed now.
Yep.
You know, like I'm going to IGN much anymore.
Yeah. Probably more people get information from like YouTubers than they do from like IGN at this point.
I get my information from you, Elijah, when you post stuff in Slack.
I share so much stuff in there.
That's where I get my gaming information right there.
Ooh, let me post this.
I did just want to say, by the way, because we were talking about the Resident Evil 7 reveal, that is such a great pick, because I like you said, I very clearly remember us sitting there and just, we didn't know what it was. Like, there was no indication in that trailer that it was Resident Evil until the logo came up. And that was such a good reveal.
I specifically remember arguing with Elijah that it wasn't Resident Evil.
Yeah.
I go back all the time and watch that clip, because we have the 2 clips, the Spider-Man and the Resident Evil ones, and I'll go back all the time and watch them, because it's just, the end of the video is playing, and then you and I just nothing. Oh! And then all of a sudden just freaking out, and then even more so, the date comes up and you're just ah!
Yeah, it was so good. So good. Seth, what about you? I know what yours is, so go on and
I don't know.
Bring it out, buddy.
There's a couple that you might think that would be mine, but my favorite E3 moment of all time was the PlayStation and Xbox reveal conferences. Well, they weren't reveals, but that was PlayStation 4 had been revealed at a special event a few months before that,
April.
and then the E3 conferences came in hot, and Microsoft had such a poopy E3 conference that
TV.
no one liked.
Well,
TV.
And
the TV one was their February event.
Yeah.
They did a thing in February for an hour. It's like, TV! And then, they did not.
everyone hated it. And Microsoft was digging themselves such a big hole. And they went into like this awful E3 press conference. And then Sony came in and they just so directly confronted Microsoft in a sarcastic and like hilarious way with their Shuhei Yoshida, here's how my friends borrow games video. And like that is the first thing that came to my mind. I'm like, oh yeah, that's my favorite moment. Honorable mention to the Final Fantasy VII remake, where
That's what I thought you were going to say.
Oh, yeah.
No, where Elijah tried to stop getting me to scream because we were in his mom's, his Graham's house. He's like, dude, you have to calm down. I'm like, you calm down. I was like screaming at the top of my lungs.
In my defense, I was screaming internally, and it was taking everything to hold off.
Oh my god! Still waiting on part 2 though. Whatever.
Maybe someday.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It was just, E3's magic, I think, started to die down when G4 TV stopped having the coverage, because because there's still a place for that, in my opinion. Like Star Wars Celebration just passed, right? And I was watching all of the like interviews and stuff like that I used to watch, just like I had for G4. The thing was, though, with G4 was they did such a good job of having a centralized location where you could get all of the E3 coverage in one spot on one channel, and you knew you could like just watch it all day, and that was all the E3 coverage. But once G4 disappeared, there was a couple places that tried to do it, and I think 2014 Kind of Funny had a really good one where like Kind of Funny was streaming for like 3 days straight, but it was never really the same after G4 left. So after that, I think is when the die was cast for the end of E3, because once the streamers and stuff started taking over, like Coach said, it was more of an influencer based event. I think that was it.
They sell exclusive Funkos at E3 now. That should tell you everything you need to know.
That is weird. That's weird.
Well, they don't sell them this year, do they?
That's a good point.
Who knows? Funko will still probably like E3 exclusive Funkos. Get them on Amazon.
I've been waiting. I swear to God, I have been waiting for 10 years for Funkos to die. They just won't go away.
They're never going to die.
They're
never going to die. Coach, what's your best E3 moment?
So it's the reveal for the Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. So you got to go back to Space World 2000, and they were showing off some different prototypes for games for the GameCube, right? Because the GameCube hadn't been released yet. So this is 2000. So you had whatchamacallit, you had Luigi's Mansion on there, you had Metroid, you had a mature Zelda Link fighting Ganon, right? They were in this battle in a dungeon, and it was awesome, right? So it was super good. Then the GameCube releases, and then E3 of 2002, they show the reveal trailer for Wind Waker, and everybody melted, right? Because it was so vastly different than what we saw 2 years prior to that. But to this day, Wind Waker still plays and looks good on the GameCube, right? Even better on the Wii U with the HD. But I just remember how just the controversy of that title, because you're coming off of Ocarina of Time, and at the time that was was Final Fantasy VII. Had that been released by 2002?
Yes.
Yeah,
That was late 90s, right?
97.
97.
Right. Okay. So pretty much Final Fantasy VII and Ocarina of Time were two of the biggest games in gaming, besides just not even talking about PC stuff, right? So going to the cell shaded, nobody liked it. There was a lot of controversy, but it played good. It ran smooth. There weren't any hiccups. And like today, till this day, it still stood the test of time, I believe.
Yeah.
And do you remember what you got when you pre-ordered it?
Was it the Master Quest?
Yeah, the Ocarina of Time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was called Master Quest. I was going to say Master Quest, but part of me was like, that's not what it's called.
So you got both. You got the regular, and then you got the Master Quest.
So,
Okay, Coach, quick question for you.
All right.
What do you think is the better pre-order bonus? The Ocarina of Time Master Quest or the Resident Evil 4 preview disc?
I knew you were going to say that. Okay, so that's a tough one because I totally dig both of them. Now, you only get the first part when the bell rings, right? And then all of the townspeople go into... So it's that first part. But I've never had a reaction like I have when Sack Guy, the chainsaw guy, chopped my head off. I thought that was one of the best gaming moments I ever had. Like
that
was awesome.
By the way, a great topic for a future episode, talking about like demo discs.
yes.
We're like, because like there's the classic Zone of the Enders one, stuff like that. That's a great topic for a future episode.
Yeah,
Austin, bank that.
Okay.
Also, Elijah, I don't like that you didn't respect Coach's traditions by raising your hand before you asked him a question.
I apologize.
You got to respect this man.
There you go.
Okay.
Call him Mr. Newman.
Mine is more of a funny moment, but I still think this was like one of the most shocking things because, okay, so Sony's marketing in the late 2000s, early 2010s, or late aughts, I guess, early 2010 era, their marketing was phenomenal. And I say that because there was a character that they used, Kevin Butler.
Oh, yeah.
Tragedy. And my honestly, my favorite, and just I always think about this anytime I think of E3, is when I want to say it was maybe 2010 or 2011, they brought out Kevin Butler. That was not his actual name. He was an actor, and he was in all the PS3 and PSP commercials. They brought him out on stage during E3 just to give like a rousing speech. And that's like, that was it. He did nothing else. He was just like, all right, guys, you're gamers and you're awesome. And that's like all he did in the speech. He didn't announce anything. He didn't do anything cool. He just talked about how awesome it was to be there. And, he had this, again, like rousing speech. It was like really well written, which was a shock. But I just remember seeing that and seeing him walk out and being like, why is he here? And then it was phenomenal. It was great.
People forget that those E3 conferences were shows. Like,
right.
They were really entertaining.
Yeah.
And they were exciting. Sorry. Which is why Sony always had it nailed down, and Microsoft kind of did too, but they slipped up sometimes. But I remember the one company that absolutely never got it was Ubisoft. They consistently had the
Mr.
worst
Caffeine.
conferences.
Mr. Caffeine.
Oh my God. They would always have their Just Dance party, and you'd be watching it. You'd be like, all right, so are we going to get like something else? Or
we're just going to get dancing for like 10 minutes.
I won't lie. The one year it did get to me because it started outside and they danced their way into the building. And I'm like, I don't know why, but I'm feeling it.
That's ridiculous. I remember them having like a giant Nerf battle or something one year, right? Remember that?
Yes.
They had like a Nerf or a laser battle or something. Oh my God.
What I enjoyed the most is in the early 2000s was the writing, the actual journalism. It was exciting to see pictures. This is before. They started to have like low res videos, but just screenshots, right, on IGN. When IGN was a good place to go to get just gaming info, right?
It's crazy.
Yes.
Crazy how things have changed both on that front and on E3. And I think the Kevin Butler thing is like, that's a pure example in my eyes of like what E3 used to be, and compared to what it is now, it is so different. So different.
It wasn't until, if I'm not mistaken, the mid 2000s when it stopped being primarily focused on the people watching this are investors and CEOs at Best Buy and all that. And that's when it started becoming, a lot of people around the world are now watching this.
Right.
Yeah. Once it was on G4 and streaming online, they really changed it up for the better, I thought, for a while. And I really wish those days were still around. So some good moments there.
But even like with Seth's runner-up, right, with the reveal of Final Fantasy VII Remake, Sony had really good events in that time period during the early days of the PS4. They had, because they were just throwing out games. Remember, they were all about games. They were changing, and it was a sight to see. Like, they were locked and loaded, and it was fun watching Sony during E3 at the early days of the PS4.
Well, that's my favorite era in all of gaming is late PS3, early PS4 Sony, because they had a handful of darts, right? And they threw them all at the wall at once. They're like, what's going to stick and what do people love? And it was such an exciting time because you got so many PS3 and PS4 exclusives that it created this ecosystem that you couldn't get on Xbox or Nintendo. Like, you had weird exclusives like Starhawk on PlayStation that just never went anywhere, right?
Yeah.
But they were, and you get, that was like when you got the Twisted Metal remake, stuff like that just you don't see today anymore. And it sucks because Sony had exclusive after exclusive. Like, you bought a PlayStation at that point in time, sort of like the reason you bought a Wii, or I guess a Wii U at the time. I don't know what you were buying with Nintendo.
Sorry, so nobody bought that.
Nobody bought a Wii U.
You bought it for exclusives, but on Sony you also got all the third-party games. But it was the exclusives that really sold that console, and it was really exciting exclusives that were really cool.
And you just don't see that as much nowadays. And you do occasionally, like, for example, I've been playing Death Stranding, and while I can totally see why people do and don't like that game, one thing you can't deny is that is some of the most creative an exclusive game has been in a while, especially for PlayStation.
By the way, that's another really good moment. That's like a pretty big runner-up for me, is after Kojima left Konami and he walked out on stage at E3 and he just goes, "I'm back." That was a good moment. Such a good moment.
I don't know.
And I wanted to say too, Seth, you brought this up earlier. PlayStation had like 4 or 5 years of just banger E3s. And I was thinking back, I'm pretty sure it was 3 years in a row. And, void the current quality of these games. But thinking back on it, we were all hyped for all of these. I remember they revisited The Last Guardian. They brought up Kingdom Hearts 3. They brought up Shenmue 3, Final Fantasy VII Remake, like all this stuff in a short amount of time. And I just remember it was the best of times. Let's just say that.
Sony always went last, and it made E3 worth it because you were like, all right, EA and Ubisoft might completely suck, right? But I know Sony's coming up tonight, and that is going to be a banger show.
Yep.
And it always was, man, except for the last E3 conference, which was really weird.
Oh, where it was like the 4 games, and they all went from place to place. Yeah, that was a weird conference.
Oh, that was when they showed
Tsushima, Last of Us.
Number 2, Last of Us 2.
Yeah. Yeah, Death Stranding. I forget what the other one was.
They were in the cult like church tent thing.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Like, I think by doing what these companies are doing now with like the state of plays and the Nintendo Directs, they take the excitement away because I mean, this last state of play that Sony did was actually pretty good, but that might be the first one that I've watched and have been like, all right, this is awesome. Because they're usually like really small announcements, like one big cool announcement. And I think they'd be better off probably just doing one big giant conference a year. That's kind of what I'm coming around to, because I'll be honest, I didn't even watch the state of play at first because I was like, it's just gonna suck again. It's just gonna be another like nonsense conference.
This is actually a good transition. I was actually, while we had some time, I was going to ask you guys about the state of play and what you thought of it, because Seth, I agree with you. Every state of play I've watched has sucked except for this one.
Yeah, this state of play is pretty cool. And before Elijah cuts me off, I just want to say, Resident Evil sucks, and mute him, Austin. Resident Evil sucks, and no one likes it, and those movies are trash. Just kidding. Final Fantasy 16 looks great. I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, I would say, before we come to this, I wanted to add to what Seth was saying. I wonder if part of it is in this new era where you have the like online shows now, and not that like in-person conferences and that. I wonder if part of agreements is to like show off some of these games, and that's why they have these smaller state of plays. Like, here's some games, and it might be like part of the agreement is, if you come be a timed exclusive for us, we'll give you a spot in one of our shows.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probable because you look at Deathloop, and how many times that game appeared, and we're getting the same thing now with Forspoken, where I feel like that game is just appearing at everything ever.
Yeah.
So.
Forspoken is like the Roman Reigns of video games, right? Like, no one is asking for this game, but they are like just like so insistent on showing it off at every possible opportunity, and it does not look good. It's very, I mean, not so extreme, but like, we need to talk about Sonic Frontiers at some point, because what an absolute mess that game is. It reminds me sort of Sonic Frontiers with Forspoken, but go ahead.
Yeah, so the new state of play. Like you said, this is probably one of the best state of plays I've ever seen, if not the best. It was basically from head to toe just fantastic. I think there was only like one or two games in there that I wasn't big on, but I saw a bunch of other people like, yo, that looks so good. And like Seth said, it started out with a banger and went on with another banger right afterwards. Resident Evil 4 Remake. I literally cried.
And it does look so good. And I'm so looking forward to seeing, because they have confirmed they are showing more of it on Monday at the Capcom.
Actually, I'm sorry.
Okay.
There is one thing that looked horrifically awful, and it was Street Fighter 6.
Really? You didn't think it looked good?
Dude. That open world looks
so yeah,
bad.
that did not look good.
No. Dude, it reminds me, have any of you guys played Jump Force?
No, thank God.
I have it on the shelf behind me, but I haven't played it.
Jump Force had this like completely unnecessary hub world, and the characters moved around just like that, like the over-exaggerated run. And dude, Street Fighter does not need an exploration Yakuza type like open world setup. It is like Street Fighter is a narrative driven fighting game, right? Like, they have pretty good stories with all the characters and like a overall plot that moves forward, and you just make these linear paths with these characters. That is the formula for Street Fighter. I promise you, no one wants an open world Street Fighter game. That is a terrible idea, and I don't know what they're going for with it, because the footage they showed off does not look good. The actual fighting mechanics and whatnot, which I guess is the important part, that looks really good, but the open world aspect of it nah, I'm not a big fan of that. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Do you?
Oh no, go ahead.
I guess I'm curious. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Are people really excited for it? Because I haven't heard too many people talk about it.
I have
good.
seen a whole bunch of people I know say they are super excited for it, and these are people I had no idea even liked fighting games or that.
So I think the thing was Street Fighter 4 was huge, and that was the last Street Fighter game I really played. Until Pedro broke me famously in fighting games. And then Street Fighter 5 came out, and it was like a huge dud. It was like an unfinished, unpolished turd. And I think it kind of just blew over really fast. Like, no one really got into Street Fighter 5 too much. So I think Street Fighter 6 is coming out, and everyone's kind of like, all right. Because I think the vibe with Street Fighter 5 was, we don't need this yet, and it looks just like Street Fighter 4.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that with 6 coming out, and we see like a whole bunch of diverse roster of characters that are different from like 4 and 5, I think this is going to be a bigger one because it's just so different. And I think they messed up with Street Fighter 4 because by the end of all the updates to Street Fighter 4, they had like this massive roster of characters of like every character throughout Street Fighter and all these new characters, and they did like a Super Smash Bros. Ultimate thing where like it's going to be hard to make another Smash Brothers game that's not Ultimate.
Yeah.
Because there's so many characters and they get played so well. So I think with 5, it was just kind of like, well, why would we play this when we have 4? You know? And then now I think it's been so long since then that now 6 is coming out and it looks different enough that people are going to be excited for it.
I was going to say, the actual fighting mechanics and stuff look really good. I really like the art style where it's got that like paint kind of aesthetic. I know that's always been a thing, but it seems like they've kind of changed it up a little with this, and it looks like a really pretty game when it comes to the actual fights.
Yeah.
So I don't really know much about Street Fighter, but it looks different enough to me at least. And
one thing I really respect is that in Street Fighter 5, I think it was, they had the pre-order bonus for like the bearded Ryu and Ken, and people went crazy about it because of how cool it looked. And now that's the default appearance for Ryu. I don't think we've seen Ken in.
No, we haven't seen him yet.
Yeah, but the default appearance for Ryu is the like old Ronin type bearded appearance, which is cool because you can tell he's older because he's wearing his master's type top, which is pretty neat. Sorry, I'm a giant nerd when it comes to Street Fighter.
So I just wanted to say that, to go back to the quality of this state of play, like I said, I really think this is the only good state of play that I've seen in my eyes. Like, every other state of play that I've watched has been just unbearable, and so it's good to have one that I actually was like, oh yeah, I'm glad I sat down and watched that for 30 minutes. But there were just so many good announcements. The pacing was excellent, and oh man, Final Fantasy 16. Dude, I am so excited for that game. That honestly might be one of my top games right now as far as anticipation goes.
Well,
I think the wild thing is, how is Final Fantasy 16 my third most anticipated game from that conference, and that game looks amazing.
Yeah.
Hold up, hold the phone. All right.
Okay.
As a Final Fantasy veteran, all right, we don't do this.
It's
okay.
true.
All right. Hold on. I'm not excited.
You don't get excited until like you get that final like gameplay trailer, because I'm telling you, I watched this and I was still like, no, I'm getting real Final Fantasy versus 13 vibes from this, where like the gameplay trailers they showed off for versus 13 were clearly cinematic, like attempts at recreating gameplay with a HUD slapped on top of it, and I'm watching this and I'm like, this looks incredible. Too incredible. It's too much. I have faith in Yoshi P, but not Square Enix.
I was going to say, it's Yoshi P.
It's Yoshi P, but it's also Square Enix in a Final Fantasy 16 game. So I'm holding out hope. I think it might be time for like a big Final Fantasy game again, but we'll see.
I just hope so. I hope so. I hope it's good. And the summons look like just incredible.
They look so
It's
good.
not-
Well, the
Oh,
The
damn.
weird thing is that I can't really nail down how the summons work in this game because it almost looks like you control the summons in a summon v summon like battle arena type situation. I don't really know how that's going to work, but I'm interested because they look gorgeous. It almost looks like the summons are your party members too.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
There's like a theory going around that I read something about, because at the end they talk about, there's like some quote where they say something about wake up Ifrit or something like that. I forget what exactly they say, but people are wondering if you play as Ifrit, and
Oh.
it kind of works the reverse where like your human characters are kind of, you still play as them, but essentially your main character is Ifrit or a summon. I think that would be interesting. That'd be a unique way to turn it on its head.
Mm-hmm.
Main character is a red mage that uses fire magic, so it makes sense.
Yeah. So, yeah, that game looks phenomenal, and I do hope it's good. You are right, though, Seth. I need to just not be excited.
There were two other games there that really caught my attention. One of them being Eternites, which is a JRPG / dating sim, and it came from the person making it, like the lead person making it, played Persona 5 and loved it, then went back and played Personas 4 and 3, loved them, and quit his job and started making this.
Yeah, Elijah, the second I saw that gameplay and I saw a calendar date at the top right of the screen, I was like, oh, I know what this is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm interested in it, though. The gameplay it showed off had my attention.
What's your other one?
There is no way we can get out of here without talking about the Callisto Protocol.
Ooh.
It looks so good. Holy crap. I came out of there going, I want this game right now. And the fact that we have a date for it, if they can stick that date, that's amazing. Because this is, what if the original maker of Dead Space made a game that was Dead Space, just not with the name? And what if it comes out a month before Dead Space?
That is crazy that they're putting it that close. And am I remembering correctly, or was this originally like in the PUBG universe?
It was. It was
But it's
originally
not
in the
anymore.
PUBG universe, but no. They came out about probably 6 days ago, roughly. I was like, hey, it's not in the PUBG universe anymore. It ended up growing into its own thing so much bigger than they planned.
I was going to say, because I was watching this trailer and I was like, how in the hell does this have even remotely anything to do with PUBG? So I'm glad that
I watched the original trailer and said, how the hell does this have anything to do with PUBG?
But yeah, that game looks really good. And I'm glad that we're kind of seeing more horror games, because I feel like,
Same.
I don't know, there was like a period of time where I felt like they just kind of went away for a while. And so it's good to
Well,
bring them back in full strength.
we were talking about like that PlayStation conference where we got Resident Evil 7 and Spider-Man, and right there are two, I would say, like almost genre enlightening games where Resident Evil 7 helped bring horror back into mainstream gaming in a way it hadn't been in a very long time. And Spider-Man kind of reinvented, we had the Batman games, the first couple were great, Night was just not as well received, and that really brought, this is how a superhero game can and should be.
Yeah.
One thing I gotta say is we have the perfect medium now for horror games, and no one is taking advantage of it with VR. And that is super frustrating. Because I don't know if you guys know this.
Except
Resident Evil, yeah.
I'm okay with that.
But I don't know if you guys know this. I think I talked to you about it before, but I did a research paper in college on virtual reality, and it showed that when people played Resident Evil on their TVs, it didn't activate the same parts of their brain that it did when they played it in VR. And they had significantly like more terror from VR than they did from the TV, which makes sense, right? But it was like the way it went into detail about it. It seems like VR has a much more meaningful impact on the parts of our brain that like actually create fear. And it's strange to me that no one is taking advantage of the VR horror genre. I mean, there's people doing it, but not many.
So, I love horror games. Love them. And I booted up Blair Witch VR. Like I can play any horror game. Like right now, I can just boot up any and be like, all right, let's do this. I started up Blair Witch VR, got to the main menu, and quit out and said, I can't do this.
Was Blair Witch VR what was the game that got banned last year from Twitch because it had a really graphic scene of cutting someone's face off? Do you guys remember this story?
Martha is Dead.
Is dead, yeah.
Which I really need to play. I want to play that. I just haven't grabbed it yet. Yeah. They actually changed it on the PlayStation versions of the game. That's not interactive now.
Wow.
So you still see it. You just can't press the button. Okay?
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Whatever.
All right, guys. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up there. Is there anything else any of you would like to add for this very special episode 100 of the Frame Skip podcast?
First off, the State of Play made it so I can see my Lady Dimitrescu in VR, which means I will literally be looking straight up in order to see her face. 9 foot 6 inches tall.
That is one of my favorite memes of all time. Is like her holding up Master Chief. You guys ever see that one?
No.
Yes.
Because Master Chief is like a normal height, and she like holds him up with one hand against the wall. It's like really funny.
I loved all of the memes with her. The one was just when I'm playing Resident Evil and she's chasing me, and it just had the one person going, "Oh no, don't chase me," and everything and such, and is just walking briskly.
All right, guys. Well, I appreciate you all for listening. Anyone who's listening at home on Podbean or Spotify or wherever you're listening to the show, please share it with your friends. We always appreciate a share. If you can get it out to people, tell them that we just hit episode 100, so we must be really cool. They'd probably love to hear that feedback and probably want to listen to cool folks like us. So
I agree.
share the show and get us out there. Retweet us, share us on Facebook, whatever you need to do. Just share it somehow. So, of course, you can always write in questions at any of our social media pages. We are at Frameskip Pod on pretty much everything. You can also fill out our question form at bit.ly/frameskipq. That's bit.ly/frameskipq. Elijah is on Twitter at Loco Lizardman. Seth, is that Seth the 90s kid? Don't follow him. I am at Austin J. Eller. And Coach is
Dead.
A leaf in the wind.
Oh no, Coach is gonna die.
Well, one day we all are, but
And of course,
don't
forget Elijah also streams on Twitch. So check him out there at twitch.tv/Loco Lizardman, or you can just search Loco Lizardman on Twitch. George, who is not on this episode, he is at PurpleBird616 on Twitter. And you can also find his podcast there, his comic book podcast, Short Box Summary, over there. So go check him out. Give him a follow as well. So until next week, we'll be back with episode 101 Dalmatians. We'll see you then.